Novel The Kite Runner by Khalid Hosseini. Chapter number 12. In Afghanistan, Yalda, in the first night of the month of Jadi, the first night of the winter, and the longest night of the year, as was the tradition, Hassan and I used to stay up late, our feet tucked under the kursi, while Ali tossed apple skin into the stove and told us ancient tales of sultans and thieves to pass that longest of nights. It was from Ali that I learned the lore of Yelda, that bedeviled moths flung themselves at candle flames and wolves climbed mountains looking for the sun. Ali swore that if you ate watermelon the night of Yelda, you would not get thirsty the coming summer. When I was older, I read in my poetry book that Yelda was the starless night. Tormented lovers kept vigil, enduring the endless dark, waiting for the sun to rise and bring with it their loved one. After I met Suraya Tahiri, every night of the week became a Yelda for me, and when Sunday mornings came, I rose from bed, Suraya Tahiri's brown-eyed face already in my head. In Baba's bus, I counted the miles until I could see her sitting barefoot, arranging cardboard boxes of yellowed encyclopedias, her heels white against the asphalt, silver bracelet jingling around her slender wrists. I would think of the shadow her hair cast on the ground when it slid off her back and hung down like a velvet curtain. Suraya swap meet princess the morning sun to my Yelda. I invented excuse to stroll down the aisles, which Baba acknowledged with a playful smirk, and past the Tahiri's stand. I would wave at the general, perpetually dressed in his shiny overpressed grey suit, and he would wave back. Sometimes he would get up from his director's chair and we could make small talk about my writing, the ward, the day's bargains, and I would have to will my eyes not to peel away, not to wander to where Suraya sat reading a paperback. The journal and I would say our goodbyes, and I would try not to slouch as I walked away. Sometimes she sat alone, the journal off to some other row to socialize, and I would walk by pretending not to know her but dying too. Sometimes she was there with a portly middle aged woman with a pale skin and dyed red hair. I promised myself that I would talk to her before the summer was over, but schools reopened, the leaves reddened, yellowed, and fell. The rains of winter swept in and wakened Baba's joint. Baby leaves sprouted once more, and I still had not had the heart, the dil, to even look her in the eye. The spring quarter ended in the late May 1985. I aced all of my general education classes, which was a minor miracle given how could sit in lectures and think of the soft hook of Saraya's nose. Then one sweltering Sunday that summer, Baba and I were the flea market, sitting at our booth, fanning our faces with newspaper. Despite the sun bearing down like a branding iron, the market was crowded that day and sales had been strong. It was only 12:30, but we had already made $160. I got up, stretched, and asked Baba if he wanted a coke. He said he would love one. Be careful, Amir, he said as I began to walk. Of what, Baba? I am not an ahmak, so don't play stupid with me. I don't know what you are talking about. Remember this, Baba said, pointing at me. The man is a Pashtun to the root. He has Nunj and Namoos, honor and pride. The tenets of the Pashtun man, especially when it came to the chastity of a wife or a daughter. I am only going to get us drinks. Just don't embarrass me. That's all I ask. I won't. God, Baba. Baba lit a cigarette and started fanning himself again. I walked toward the concession booth initially, then turned left at the t-shirt stand where for $5 you could have the face of Jesus, Elvis, Jim Morrison, or all three pressed on a white nylon t-shirt. Mariachi music played overhead and I smelled pickles and grilled meat. I spotted the Tahiri's grey van 2 rows from ours next to kiosk selling mango on a stick. She was alone, reading white ankle-length summer dress today. open-toed sandals, hair pulled back and crowned with a tulip-shaped bun. I meant to simply walk by again. I thought I had, except suddenly I was standing at the edge of the Tahri's white tablecloth, staring at Suraya's across curling irons and old neckties. She looked up. Salam. I said, I am sorry to be Mozaim. I didn't mean to disturb you, Salam. Is General Sahib here today? I said, my ears were burning. I could not bring myself to look her in the eye. He went that way, she said, pointed to her right. The bracelet slipped down to her elbow, silver against olive. Will you tell him I stopped by to pay my respects? I said, I will. Thank you. I said, oh, and my name is Amir, in case you need to know, so you can tell him that I stopped by to pay my respects. Yes. I shifted on my feet, cleared my throat. I will go now. Sorry to have disturbed you. Nah, you didn't, she said. Oh God, I tipped my head and gave her a half smile. I will go now. Had not I already said that? Khuda Hafiz, Khuda Hafiz. I began to walk, stopped and turned. I said it before I had a chance to lose my nerve. Can I ask what you are reading? She blinked. I held my breath suddenly. I felt the collective eyes of the flea market Afghans shift to us. I imagined a hush falling, lips stopping in mid-sentence, heads turning, every eyes narrowing with keen interest. What was this? Up to that point, our encounter could have been interrupted as a respectful inquiry, one man asking for the whereabouts of the another man. But if I had asked her a question and if she answered, we would be chatting. Me, a Morjarat, a single young man, and she, an unwed young woman, one with a history no less. This was teetering dangerously on the verge of gossip material, and the best kind of it. Poison tongues would flap, and she would bear the brunt of that poison, not me. I was fully aware of the Afghan double standard that favored my gender. No, did you see him chatting with her? But woo! Did you see how she would not let him go? What a Lochak. By Afghan standards, my question had been bold with it. I had bared myself and left little doubts as to my interest in her. But I was man, and all I had risked was a bruised ego. Bruises healed, reputations didn't. Would she take my dare? She turned the book so the cover faced me. Wuthering Heights. Have you read it? She said. I nodded. I could feel the pulsating beat of my heart behind my eyes. It's a sad story. Sad stories make good books, she said. They do. I heard you right. How did she know? I wondered if her father had told her. Maybe she had asked him. I immediately dismissed both scenarios as absurd. Fathers and sons could talk freely about women, but no Afghan girl, no decent and Mohtaram Afghan girl at least queried her father about a young man, and no father, especially a Pashtun with Nanj and Namus, would discuss a Mojarat with his daughter, not unless the fellow in question was a Khastigar, a suitor who had done the honorable thing and sent his father to knock on the door. Incredibly, I heard myself say, would you like to read one of my stories? I would like that, she said. I sensed an unease in her now, saw it in the way her eyes began to flick side to side, maybe checking for the journal. I wondered that he would say if he found me speaking for such an inappropriate length of time with his daughter. Maybe I will bring you one someday, I said. I was about to say more when the woman I had seen on occasion with Suraya came walking up the aisle. She was carrying a plastic bag full of fruit. When she saw us, her eyes bounced from Suraya to me and back. She smiled. Amir Jan, good to see you, she said, unloading the bag on the tablecloth. Her brow glistened with a sheen of sweet. Her red hair, coiffed like a helmet, glittered in the sunlight. I could see bits of her scalp where the hair had thinned. She had small green eyes buried in a cabbage round face, capped teeth, and a little fingers like sausages. A golden Allah rested on her chest, the chain burrowed under the skin tags and folds of her neck. I am Jamila, Suraya Jan's mother. Salam Khalajan, I said, embarrassed as often I was around Afghans that she knew me and I had no idea who she was. How is your father? She said. He is well, thank you. You know your grandfather Ghazi Sahab, the judge. Now his uncle and my grandfather were cousins, she said. So you see, we are related. She smiled a cap tooth smile, and I noticed the right side of her mouth drooping a little. Her eyes moved between Suraya and me again. I had asked Baba once why General Tahiri daughters had not married yet. No suitors, Baba said, no suitable suitors, he amended, but he would not say more. Baba knew how lethal idle talk about could prove to a young woman's prospects of marrying well. Afghan men, especially those from reputable families, were fickle creatures. A whisper here and insinuation there, and they feel like startled birds. So weddings had come and gone, and no one had sung Ahista Boro for Suraya. No one had painted her palms with henna. No one had held a Quran over her headdress, and it had been General Tahris who had danced with her at every wedding. And now this woman, this mother with her heartbreakingly eager crooked smile and the barely veiled hope in her eyes. I cringed a little at the position of power I had been granted, and all because I had won at the genetic lottery that had determines my sex. I could never read the thoughts in the journal's eye, but I knew this much about his wife. If I was going to have an adversary in this, whatever this was, it would not be her. Sit down, Abirjan, she said. Suraya, get him a chair. Wash one of those peaches. They are sweet and fresh. Nah, thank you, I said. I should get going. My father's waiting. Oh, Khanu, Tahiri said, clearly impressed that I had done the polite thing and declined the offer. Then here, at least have this. She threw a handful of kiwis and a few peaches into a paper bag and insisted I take them. Carry my salam to your father and come back to see us again. I will, thank you, Khalajan. I said. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Suraya looking away. I thought you were getting cokes, Baba said, taking the bag of peaches from me. He was looking at me in simultaneously serious and playful way. I began to make something up, but he bit into a peach and waved his hand. Don't bother, Amir. Just remember what I said. That night in bed, I thought of the way dappled sunlight had danced in Suraya's eyes and the delicate hollows above her collarbone. I replayed our conversation over and over in my head. Had she said, I heard you right, or I heard you are a writer? Which was it? I tossed in my sheets and stared at the ceiling, dismayed at the thought of 6 laborious interminable night of Yelda until I saw her again. It went on like that for a few weeks. I would wait until the general went for a stroll. When I would walk past the Tahiri stand, if Khanam Tahiri was there, she would offer me tea and a kulcha, and we would chat about Kabul in the old days, the people we knew, her arthritis. Undoubtedly, she had noticed that my appearances always coincided with her husband's absence, but she never let on. Oh, you just missed your kaka, she would say. I actually like it when Khanam Tahiri was there, and not just because of her amiable ways. Suraya was more relaxed, more talkative with her mother around, as if her presence legitimized whatever was happening between us. Though certainly not to the same degree that the journalists would have. Khanam Tahiri's chaperoning made our meetings, if not gossip proof, then less gossip worthy, even if her borderline fawning on the clearly embarrassed Suraya. One day, Suraya and I were alone at their booth talking. She was telling me about school, how she too was working on her general education classes at Ohlone Juniors College in Fremont. What will you major in? I want to be a teacher, she said. Really, why? I have always wanted to. When we lived in Virginia, I became ESL certified, and now I teach at the public library one night a week. My mother was a teacher too. She taught Farsi and history at Zarghuna High School for Girls in Kabul. A pot-bellied man in a deerstalker had offered $3 for a $5 set of candlesticks, and Suraya let him have it. She dropped the money in the little candy box by her feet. She looked at me shyly. I want to tell you a story, she said, but I am little embarrassed about it. Tell me. It's kind of silly. Please tell me, she laughed. Well, when I was in 4th grade in Kabul, my father hired a woman named Ziba to help around the house. She had a sister in Iran, in Mashhad, and since Ziba was illiterate, she would ask me to write her sister letter once in while, and when the sister replied, I would read her letter to Ziba. One day I asked if she would like to learn to read and write. She gave me the big smile, crinkling her eyes, and said she would like that very much. So we had at the kitchen table after I was done with my own school homework, and I would teach her Alif Bay. I remember looking up sometimes in middle of the homework and seeing Ziba in the kitchen stirring meat in the pressure cooker, then sitting down with a pencil to do the alphabet homework I had assigned to her the night before. Anyway, within a year, Ziba could read children's book. We sat in the yard and she read me the tales of Dara and Sara. Slowly but correctly, she started calling me Mollam Suraya, teacher Suraya. She laughed again. I know it childish, but the first time Ziba wrote her own letter, I knew there was nothing else I had ever want to be but a teacher. I was so proud of her, and I felt I had done something really worthwhile. Yes, I lied. I thought of how I had used my literacy to ridicule Hassan, how I had teased him about big words he didn't know. My father wants me to go to law school. My mother's always throwing hints about medical school, but I am going to be a teacher. Doesn't pay much here, but it's what I want. My mother was a teacher too, I said. I know, she said. My mother told me. Then her face red denied with a blush at what she had blurted, at the implication of her answer, that Amir conversations took place between them when I was not there. I took an enormous effort to stop myself from smiling. I brought you something. I fished the roll of stapled pages from my back pocket. As promised, I handed her one of my short stories. Oh, you remember, she said, actually beaming. Thank you. I barely had time to register that she had addressed with me too for the first time, and not the formal Shuma, because suddenly her smile vanished, the color dropped from her face, and her eyes fixed on something behind me. I turned around, came face to face with General Tahiri. Amir Jan, our aspiring storyteller, what a player, he said. He was smiling thinly. Salam, General Sahib, I said through heavy lips. He moved past me toward the booth. What a beautiful day it is, na? He said, thumb hooked in the breast pocket of his vest, the other hand extended towards Suraya. She gave him the pages. They say it will rain this week. Hard to believe, isn't it? He dropped the rolled pages in the garbage can, turned to me, and gently put a hand on my shoulder. We took a few steps together. Bacham, I have grown rather fond of you. You are a decent boy. I really believe that. But, he sighed and waved a hand, even decent boys need reminding sometimes. So it's my duty to remind you that you are among peers in the flea market. He stopped. His expressionless eyes bored into mine. You see, everyone here is storyteller. He smiled, revealing perfectly even teeth. Do pass my respects to your father, Amir Jan. He dropped his hand, smiled again. What's wrong? Baba said. He was taking an elderly woman's money for a rocking horse. Nothing. I said. I sat down on an old TV set. Then I told him anyway. Ugh, Amir, he sighed. As it turned out, I did not get to brood too much over what had happened, because later that week Baba caught a cold. It started with a hacking cough and the sniffles. He got over the sniffles, but the cough persisted. He had hacked into his handkerchief, straw in his pocket. I kept after him to get it checked, but he had waved me away. He hated doctors and hospital. To my knowledge, the only time Baba had ever gone to the doctor was the time he had caught malaria in the India. Then 2 weeks later, I caught him coughing a vat of blood-stained phlegm into the toilet. How long have you been doing that? I said. What's for the dinner? He said. I am taking you to the doctor. Even though Baba was a manager at the gas station, the owner had not offered him health insurance, and Baba in his recklessness had not insisted. So I took him to the country hospital in San Jose. The sallow, puffy-eyed doctor who saw us introduced himself as a second-year resident. He looks younger than you and sicker than me, Baba grumbled. The resident sent us down for a chest x-ray. When the nurse called us back in, the resident was filling out a form. Take this to the front desk, he said, scribbling quickly. What is it? I asked. A referral. Scribble. For what? Pulmonary clinic. What's that? He gave me a quick glance, pushed up his glasses, began scribbling again. He got spot in his right lung. I want them to check it out. A spot? I said the room suddenly too small. Cancer, Baba added casually. Possible it's suspicious anyway, the doctor muttered. Can you tell us more? I asked. Not really. Need a CAT scan first, then see the lung doctor. He handed me the referral form. You said your father smokes, right? Yes, he nodded, looked from me to Baba and back again. They will call you within 2 weeks. I wanted to ask him how I was supposed to live with that word suspicious for two whole weeks. How was I supposed to eat, work, study? How could he send me home with that word? I took the form and turned it in. That night I waited until Baba fell asleep and then folded a blanket. I used it as a prayer rug. Bowing my head to the ground, I recited half-forgotten verses from the Quran, verses the mullah had made us commit to memory in Kabul, and asked for kindness from a god I was not sure existed. I envied the mullah now, envied his faith and certainty. 2 weeks passed and no one called, and when I called them, they told me they had lost the referral. Was I sure I had turned it in? They said they would call in another 3 weeks. I raised hell and bargained the 3 weeks down to one for the CAT scan, two to see the doctor. With the pulmonologist, Dr. Shanidrier was going well until Baba asked him where he was from. Dr. Shanidrier said Russia. Baba lost it. Excuses, doctor, I said, pulling Baba aside. Dr. Shanidrier smiled and stood back, stethoscope still in hand. Baba, I read Dr. Shanidrier's biography in the waiting room. He was born in Michigan. Michigan? He is American, a lot more American than you and I will ever be. I don't care where he was born. He is Rusi, Baba said, grimacing like it was a dirty word. His parents were Rusi, his grandparents were Rusi. I swear on your mother's face I will break his arm if he tries to touch me. Dr. Shanidrier's parents fled from Shoravi. Don't you see? They escaped. But Baba would hear none of it. Sometimes I think the only thing he loved as much as his late wife was Afghanistan, his late country. I almost screamed with frustration. Instead, I sighed and turned to Dr. Shanidrier. I am sorry, doctor, this is not going to work out. The next pulmonologist, Dr. Amani, was Iranian and Baba approved. Dr. Amani, a soft spoken man with a crooked mustache and a mane of grey hair, told us he had reviewed the CAT scan result and that he would have to perform a procedure called a bronchoscopy to get a piece of the lung mass for the pathology. He scheduled it for the following week. I thanked him as I helped Baba out of the office, thinking that now I had to live a whole week with this new word, mass, and even more ominous word than suspicious. I wish Suraya were there with me. I turned out that like cancer had many names. Baba's was called oat-cell carcinoma. Advanced inoperable. Baba asked Dr. Amani for a prognosis. Dr. Amani bit his lip, used the word grave. There is chemotherapy, of course, he said, but it would only be palliative. What does that mean? Baba asked. Dr. Mani sighed. It means it would not be change the outcome, just prolong it. That's a clear answer, Dr. Amani. Thank you for that. Baba said, but no chemo medication for me. He had the same resolved look on his face as the day he had dropped the stack of food stamps on Mrs. Dobbin's desk. But Baba, don't you challenge me in public, Amir. Who do you think you are? The rain General Tahiri had spoken about at the flea market was a few weeks late, but when I stepped out of Dr. Amani's office, passing car sprayed grimy water onto the sidewalks. Baba lit a cigarette. He smoked all the way to the car and all the way home, and he was slipping the key into lobby door. I said, I wish you would give the chemo a chance, Baba. Baba pocketed the keys, pulled me out of the rain and under the building stripped awning. He kneaded me on the chest with the hand holding the cigarette. Bus, I have made my decision. What about me, Baba? What I am supposed to do? I said, my eyes welling up. A look of disgust swept across his rain-soaked face. It was the same look he had given me when, as I kid, I had fall, scrape my knees, and cry. It was the crying that brought it on then, the crying that brought it on now. You are 22 years old, Amir, a grown up man. You he opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, reconsidered. Above us, rain drummed on the canvas awning. What's going to happen to you, you say? All those years, that what I was trying to teach you, how to never have to ask that questions. He opened the door, turned back to me, and one more thing. No one finds out about this, you hear me? No one. I don't want anybody's sympathy. Then he disappeared into the dim lobby. He chain smoked the rest of that day. In front of the TV, I did not know what or whom he was defying. Me, Dr. Amani, or maybe the God he had never believed in. For a while, even cancer could not keep Baba from the flea market. We made our garage sale treks on Saturdays, Baba the driver and me the navigator, and set up our display on Sundays, brass lamps, baseball gloves, sky jackets with jackets with broken zippers. Baba greeted acquaintances from the old country, and I haggled with buyers over $1 or $2, like any of it mattered. Like the day I would become an orphan was not inching closer with each closing of shop. Sometimes General Tahari and his wife strolled by. The General, ever the diplomat, greeted me with a smile and his two-handed shake, but there was a new reticence to Khanum Tahiri's demeanor, a reticence broken only by her secret droppy smiles and the furtive, apologetic looks she cast me away when the journal's attention was engaged elsewhere. I remember that period, a time of many firsts. The first time I heard Baba moan in the bathroom, the first time I found blood on his pillow. In our 3 years running the gas station, Baba had never called in sick. And other first by Halloween of that year, Baba was getting so tired by mid-Saturday afternoon that he would wait behind the wheel while I got out and bargained for junk. By Thanksgiving, he wore out before noon. When sleighs appeared on front lawns and fake snow on Douglas Firs, Baba stayed home and I drove the VW bus alone up and down the peninsula. Sometimes at the flea market, Afghan acquaintances made remarks about Baba's weight loss. At first, they were complimentary. They even asked the secret to his diet, but the queries and compliments stopped when the weight loss didn't, when the pounds kept shedding and shedding, when his cheeks hollowed and his temple melted and his eyes receded in their sockets. Then one cool Sunday, shortly after New Year's Day, Baba was selling a lampshade to a stocky Filipino man while I rummaged in the VW for a blanket to cover his legs with. Hey man, this guy needs help, the Filipino man said with alarm. I turned around and found Baba on the ground. His arms and legs were jerking. Comac, I cried. Somebody help. I ran to Baba. He was frothing at the mouth, the foamy spittle soaking his breath. His upturned eyes showed nothing but white. People were rushing to us. I heard someone say, "Seizure!" Someone else yelling, "Call 911." I heard running footsteps. The sky darkened as a crowd gathered around us. Baba's spittle turned red. He was biting his tongue. I kneeled beside his and grabbed his arms and said, "I am here, Baba. I am here. You will be all right. I am right here," as if I could soothe the convulsions out of him, talk them into leaving. My Baba alone. I felt a wetness on my knees, saw Baba's bladder had let go. "Shh, Baba Jan, I am here. Your son is right there." Dr. White, bearded and perfectly bald, pulled out me of the room. "I want to go over your father's CT scans with you," he said. He put the films up on the viewing box in the hallway and pointed with the eraser end of his pencil to the pictures of Baba's cancer, like a cop showing mug shots of the killer to the victim's family. Baba's brain on those pictures looked like cross section of a big walnut riddled with tennis ball shaped gray things. "As you can see, the cancer's metastasized," he said. "He will have to take steroids to reduce the swelling in his brain and anti-seizure medications, and I would recommend palliative radiation." "Do you know what that means?" I said I did. I could become conversant in concert talk. All right then, he said. He checked his beeper. I have to go, but you can have me paid if you have any questions. Thank you. I spent the night sitting on a chair next to Baba's bed. The next morning, the waiting room down the hall was jammed with Afghans. The butcher from the New York, an engineer who had worked with Baba on his orphanage, they filed in and paid Baba their respects in hushed tones, wished him a swift recovery. Baba was awake then, groggy and tired, but awake. Mid-morning, General Tahiri and his wife came. Suraya followed. We glanced at each other, looked away at the same time. How are you, my friend? General Tahiri said, taking Baba's hand. Baba motioned to the four hanging from his arm, smiled thinly. The general smiled back. You should not have burdened yourself, all of you, Baba croaked. It's not burden, Khanum, Tahiri said. No burden at all. More importantly, do you need anything, General Tahiri said. Anything at all. Ask me like you would ask a brother. I remember something Baba had said about Pashtun once. We may be hard-headed and I know we are far too proud, but in the hour of need, believe me that there is no one you would rather have at your side than a Pashtun. Baba shook his head on the pillow. Your coming here has brightened my eyes. The general smiled and squeezed Baba's hand. How are you, Amir Jan? Do you need anything? The way he was looking at me, the kindness in his eyes. Nah, thank you, General Sahib. I am lump short up in my throat and my eyes teared over. I bolted out of the room. I wept in the hallway by the viewing box where the night before I had seen the killer's face. Baba's door opened and Suraya walked out of his room. She stood near me. She was wearing a grey sweatshirt and jeans. Her hair was down. I wanted to find comfort in her arms. I am so sorry, Amir, she said. We all knew something was wrong, but we had no idea it was this. I blotted my eyes with my sleeve. He didn't want anyone to know. Do you need anything? No. I tried to smile. She put her hand on mine. Our first touch. I took it, brought it on my face, my eyes. I let it go. You would better go back inside, or your father will come after me. She smiled and nodded. I should. She turned to go. Suraya, yes, I am happy you came. It means the world to me. I am happy you came. It means the world to me. They discharged Baba 2 days later. They brought in a specialist called a radiation oncologist to talk Baba into getting radiation treatment. Baba refused. They tried to talk me into talking him into, but I had seen the look at Baba's face. I thanked them, signed their forms, and took Baba home in my Ford Tornado. That night, Baba was laying on the couch, a wool blanket covering him. I brought him hot tea and roasted almonds, wrapped my arms around his back, and pulled him up much too easily. His shoulder blade felt like a bird's wing under my fingers. I pulled the blanket back up to his chest where ribs stretched his thin, sallow skin. Can I do anything else for you, Baba? Nah, Bacham, thank you. I sat beside him. Then I wonder if you will do something for me if you are not too exhausted. What? I want you to go Kastgari. I want you to ask General Tahiri for his daughter's hand. Baba's dry lips stretched into a smile, a spot of green on a wilted leaf. Are you sure? More sure than I have ever been about anything you have thought it over, Balle Baba. Then give me the phone and my little notebook. I blinked. Now? Then when? I smiled. Okay. I gave him the phone and the little black notebook where Baba had scribbled his Afghan friend number. He looked up. The Tahiri's dialed, brought the receiver to his ear. My heart was doing pirouettes in my chest. Jamila Jan, Salaam Alaikum, he said. He introduced himself, paused. Much better, thank you. It was so gracious of you to come. He listened for a while, nodded. I will remember that, thank you. Is General Sahib home? Pause, thank you. His eyes flicked to me. I wanted to laugh for some reason or scream. I brought the ball of my hand to my mouth and bite on it. Baba laughed softly through his nose. General Sahib, Salaam Alaikum. Yes, much better. Balaya, you are so kind, General Sahib. I am calling to ask if may pay you and Khanam Tahiri a visit tomorrow morning. It's an honorable matter. Yes, 11 o'clock is just fine. Until then, Khuda Hafiz. He hugs up. We looked at each other. I burst into a giggles. Baba joined in. Baba wet his hair and combed it back. I helped him into a clean white shirt and noted his tie for him. Noting the 2 inches of empty space between the collar button and Baba's neck, I thought of all the empty spaces Baba would leave behind when he was gone, and I made myself think of something else. He was not gone, not yet, and this was a day for good thoughts. The jacket of his brown suit, the new he had worn to my graduation, hung over him. Too much of Baba had melted away to feel it anymore. I had to roll up the sleeves. I stopped and tied his shoelaces for him. The Taharis lived in flat one-story house in one of the residential areas in Fremont known for housing a large number of Afghans. It had bay windows, a pitched roof, and enclosed front porch on which I saw potted geraniums. The journal's grey van was parked in the driveway. I helped Baba out of the Ford and slipped back behind the wheel. He leaned in the passenger window. Be home. I will call you in a hour. Okay, Baba, I said good luck. He smiled. I drove away. In the rear view mirror, Baba was hobbling up to the Tahiri's driveway for one last fatherly duty. I paced the living room of our apartment, waiting for Baba's call, 15 paces long and 10.5 paces wide. What if the journal said no? What if he hated me? I kept going to the kitchen, checking the oven clock. The phone rang just before noon. It was Baba. Well, the journal accepted. I let out a burst of air, sat down. My hands were shaking. He did. Yes, but Suraya Jan is upstairs in her room. She wants to talk to you first. Okay, Baba said something to someone, and there was a double click as he hung up. Amid Suraya's voice slammed. My father said yes. I know, I said. I switched hands. I was smiling. I am so happy. I don't know what to say. I am happy too, Amir. I can't believe this is happening. I laughed. I know. Listen, she said. I want to tell you something. Something you have to know before. I don't care what it is you need to know. I don't want us to start with secrets, and I would rather you hear it from me. If it will make you feel better, tell me, but it won't change anything. There was a long pause at the other end. When we lived in Virginia, I ran away with an Afghan man. I was 18 at the time. Rebellious, stupid, and he was into drugs. We lived together for almost a month. All the Afghans in Virginia were talking about it. Father eventually found us. He showed up at the door and made me come home. I was hysterical, yelling, screaming, saying I hated him. Anyway, I came home and she was crying. Excuse me, I heard her put the phone down below her nose. Sorry, she came back on sounding hoarse. When I came home, I saw my mother had a stroke. The right side of her face was paralyzed, and I felt so guilty. She didn't deserve that. Father moved us to California shortly after. A silence followed. How are you and your father now? I said. We have always had our differences. We still do, but I am grateful he came for me that day. I really believed he saved me. She paused. So, does what I told you bother you a little? I said. I owed her the truth on this one. I could not lie to her and say that my pride, my iftikhar wasn't stung at all, that she had been with a man whereas I had never taken a woman to bed. It didn't bother me a bit, but I had pondered this quite a lot in weeks before. I asked Baba to go category, and in the end, the question that always came back to me was this: how could I, of all people, chastise someone for their past? Does it bother you enough to change your mind? No, Saraya, not even close. I said. Nothing you said changes anything. I want us to marry. She broke into fresh tears. I envied her. Her secret was outspoken, dealt with. I opened my mouth and almost told her how I had betrayed Hassan, lied, driven him out, and destroyed a 40-year relationship between Baba and Ali. But I didn't. I suspected there were many ways in which Suraya Tahiri was a better person than me. Courage was just one of them.